You know, I just climbed out of a time capsule. I'm 150 years old, but I don't even look a day over 149. I just climbed out of the time capsule, or we'll just say I did. And we're talking about Bethel. And we're talking about, you know, I'm back in Bethel, and I'm looking around, and son of a gun, it looks different. Guest, Matt Knickerbocker, first Selectman of Bethel. Co-host Emily Volpintesta.
Right. Thank you.
What goes on? What gives?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Bethel, and I live in Bethel, and I'm just wondering, is there a limit how developed a town can get? Will Bethel ever, you know, lose that village feel? And if David's coming from 150 years ago, will someone from 150 years ago have complained that Bethel's developed too much, and can it get any more developed? Or
well, let me start. Well, first of all, you don't look a day over 140. Seriously.
Thank you. Kind words. I appreciate
whoever
it.
your cryo specialist was, they did a great job.
My grandfather, my maternal grandfather's hair. That's what it is.
oh,
Well, yeah, they didn't have barbers where you were, but that's okay. It looks
Well,
good.
you know, it works as too. They didn't pack any scissors into the time capsule, apparently.
Right. Okay, so you climbed out of a time capsule and you went, wow, this place is different. So
that's right.
yeah. So it has changed a lot. But the village center is pretty much going to look very similar to what it was 150 years ago. There are some newer buildings, like the building that houses O'Neill's.
Right.
Now has the Kowloon restaurant and the nail place.
That's right.
That's new. Where Famous Pizza is, that's new. Those used to be hat factories in that area down there. Some of the houses, some of the brick areas.
I remember that.
Yeah. The chiropractic clinic, Dr. Boylan's clinic, is a newer building, and that was there wasn't even a street there back then. That was just like a simple Greenwood Avenue was just a simple little path that went through there. But where the library is, the Seeley House.
Okay.
Now that's much bigger today because you have the big expansion off the back. But the Seeley House itself would look exactly the same, the front of it, where Nikki's Hair Cutters and Bethel Glass and Shower Door. That was actually a private residence back in those days. It was another one of those Greek Revival type homes. It's changed a lot over the years. But then the Opera House and all those buildings going down that way, those would look pretty much the same. Where you'd really see a lot of changes in the north end of Bethel up in Stony Hill, because that was all orchards and farmland. And that's changed, obviously.
They put a highway through there, didn't they?
Hey, they sure did.
They allowed cars on that highway?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And State 84, right?
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of them, too. And you know, just so you know, the state's going to make that bigger, so they'll put more cars through there over the next, I'd say, 5 years. Oh, yeah.
Interstate 84 is going to be
Interstate 84 is part of Governor Malloy's, I think it's $100 billion 30-year transportation initiative. But the first phase of that over the next 5 years is going to be to widen 84 from Danbury all the way through to on the other side of Waterbury.
Okay.
So it's not going to start on the Danbury side. I think they're going to work backwards, go the other way. But yeah, that's congested. You know that every Friday night in the summer when 84 gets congested with people heading north up into Vermont, people start cutting through town and the traffic gets bad. So you know, it's not a bad idea. It does need to happen, but I do hope that the state has plans to improve public transportation too, like trains. Take some of those cars and their pollutants out of the atmosphere. So
now you were saying that there's boards and commissions that are responsible for how developed the town gets.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that before we started rolling tape, because I think the question was how much is there a limit? You know
exactly.
Well, the limit physically is how much more land do you have to build on, and do you want to build up and have multi-story housing, things like that. But that stuff is all under the control of the Planning and Zoning Board. Planning and Zoning is a panel of, I think, 9 people, but they have alternates as well. It's a critically important board. It runs completely independently. The Board of Selectmen cannot overrule them. The Board of Finance cannot overrule them. They have their own sources of budget to conduct the studies and things that they do. That money comes from, sometimes it comes from grants, other times it comes from fees that are paid by developers. But that board is directly elected by the people, by the people of Bethel. You'll notice that there's a P&Z line, and every other year when we go to the polls, there's a planning and zoning people on that ballot. And every 10 years, they're required to create a document. This is required under state law. It is called the Plan of Conservation and Development. And in that document, they lay out exactly what the goals are. And we're actually coming up. It takes about 2 years to develop that document. The next one is due in the year 2017. So they're starting it this year.
Oh, wow.
So you'll notice, watch the paper, because they will be having public hearings. Because this is the opportunity that regular citizens have to come in and say, how much development they want, what type they want, how much open space they want, and that's where those goals and guidelines are set. So right now, the development that's going on in Bethel is really under the development plan of the 2007 Plan of Conservation and Development. And we've done a very good job over the last couple of years. It's not always about development too, it's also about conservation.
Exactly.
So in the last couple of years, and this is something that I'm very proud of, because this took a lot of behind-the-scenes effort, but we purchased the 72-acre Franck property, which planning and zoning, to their credit, had targeted years ago to preserve as open space and have passive recreation in there. And there was a chance that the family might have sold it to a developer that would have developed condominiums in there. But now that that was successfully negotiated and purchased, it's now under the direction of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And it's, they really haven't done any development with it, but I think there is a plan at some point in the future to allow some trails to be cut through there.
Oh, good.
And connect with the hiking trails that go through the Franck property in Newtown. So it's a massive, pristine area, no hunting allowed, no mountain biking, just a nice, peaceful place to go enjoy nature and take a walk. It's a great place.
Wow.
So anyway, generally speaking, that's how that works. Development goes under that board.
Okay. I was just wondering, because sometimes I walk around downtown Bethel, and I just love how it has that small town feel, and I'd hate to think that it becomes like Stamford or overdeveloped. And
no, I personally don't see that happening, because one of the things that the Planning and Zoning Board did, to their credit, is they I think this goes back like 9 or 10 years ago. They protected the downtown part, gave it a new designation called a village center.
Okay.
And what that does, it restricts the type of things that developers can do. And roughly speaking, it kind of goes from the food bag down through and incorporates the area around P.T. Barnum Square and those old buildings there, and then goes out to Blackman Avenue. So development in that area is very, very tightly restricted. So you're not going to see a 4-story apartment building go up like you would in Stamford. That just can't happen.
I saw Calvin Coolidge come through there once, and it was a motorcade. I think there were cars involved in it, but Calvin Coolidge came down the street once. I think that young man Patrick Wilde has some pictures about that in his book about the history of Bethel.
I think it was Calvin Coolidge. I'm pretty sure, but it was a U.S. president. I'm 99% sure it was Calvin. And there's a great black and white picture in Patrick Wilde's book, which, by the way, you can see at the library. You can order it through Bird's Books. I think we even have a copy in the town clerk's office.
Oh, great!
There's a black and white picture that is taken roughly from where P.T. Barnum Square is. It's funny that that's called a square, because it's really a triangle. But if you stand right on Greenwood Avenue, where approximately where the bus stop is, and you look at the building that used to house Bethel Cycle. The motorcade is coming right through there. You can see banners, and you can see people hanging out the windows waving.
You can see me hanging out the window. As a matter of fact, I'm there next to my twin brother, Mark Twain. But Mark was there with me. Samuel Longhorn Clemens was there with me, and we're there. You could look at the picture. You'll see us. My hair was a little shorter then. Mark's was Samuel's was a little bit longer. So.
Well, they probably didn't tell you when they cryo-freeze people, your hair keeps growing. So, you have to plan for it.
Seems that way, at least.
Yeah.
So these things called paved roads. People have been telling me that the roads were in pretty rough shape a few years ago and seem to be getting better. And tell me about it.
Well, yeah, they were in pretty rough shape. Well, it depends on who you ask. Some people would say they're still in rough shape, because we still have a few that we need to to cover. But here's how it works. Way back when you got in your time capsule, there were no paved roads. They were dirt roads. And for the most part, they were mud. And even horses would sometimes get stuck in the mud. And then when they started hauling buggies around, they'd really get stuck in the mud. And then when they started driving horseless carriages around, sometimes the roads were impassable. So they just put gravel and stone on those and packed them down as much as possible to get going. And then more and more of these horseless carriages, these automobiles came. So eventually they started layering either concrete or other hard materials. In the 50s, they started using this new stuff back then it was called Mercatum.
Macadam, yeah.
Macadam,
Named after another cousin of mine in Scotland.
Right. We call that today bituminous concrete, otherwise known as asphalt. It's mixed with sand.
What's your language, young man?
So anyway, so what happens with this stuff, though, they just started layering this stuff down on top of the path that became gravel that now becomes a paved road. The problem is they don't last very long. This macadam stuff dries up, it cracks. It's not completely waterproof, so water gets into it. Groundwater comes up underneath it when you have wet seasons. It freezes underneath. Then that freeze thaws, it creates a void, and a hole opens up, and you've got potholes.
Wow.
So for many years, the general way that these things were fixed was about every 2 or 3 years. Remarkably often it would be on an election year, go figure. They would just go through and they put another ½ inch or an inch of this stuff on top of everything.
We used to ask the same question back then. What the roads? The roads. What have you done for our roads?
That's right.
Lately.
So they'd do this, ½ inch of stuff, and they'd paint nice, pretty, brand new yellow lines on it. People say, "Oh, look at those beautiful roads." 2 years later, they'd be full of holes again. So what we're doing now, what we've been doing since 2010 with the road recovery plan, is tearing those roads up. You have this big machine that actually grinds the old asphalt completely off, and then you take new material, new base material, and you sometimes you add as much as a foot or two of this stuff down. You pack it down. You also add drainage, curtain drains, and improved storm drains to keep the groundwater from coming up underneath this stuff. And then you put down 2 layers of fresh asphalt that are held together with a binding layer, and now you've got a road that's going to last 20, 30 years. And we know it's working. It's expensive and it's time consuming. So yes, for you folks that live on roads that are just now getting paved, you have had to wait your turn, and we're sorry about that. But the good news is this past winter we had, this was a tough winter.
Yes.
Our engineering department said that this winter aged our older roads the equivalent of 5 years in just one winter.
Wow, yeah.
But those new roads that we're doing this, almost no potholes at all. They're surviving.
Oh, good.
So we are right now about 75% through with this road, this aggressive road rebuilding plan. And this year we've got a whole raft of them. We're finishing up Codfish, Old Dodging Town, Twin Maple, McCower Circle, Nashville Extension, starting work on some of the streets that go into the school district. Mountain Orchard, Cindy, Highland, and Andrews will all get fresh water mains, brand new water mains as part of our utility upgrades, and then they'll be repaved with all new stuff, and that's all going on in the 2015-2016 season. So we're just about there, and then we just need to maintain them. Just that'll bring that budget down to a maintenance level. You still got to keep up with it, because the problem that we had back in the old days is they didn't put enough money into road maintenance. Then they would get bad, and then you had to spend a lot more to rebuild them. So we kind of know what the deal is.
Sounds
now.
like medicine, sort of. You have preventative medicine, or you have
or you have big bills.
Big bills later on.
Exactly.
Old guy used to build carriages. Used to say, "You can pay me now, or you can pay me later."
Yep.
I think that's been used a few times since then.
It has.
Well, I know that 302 this winter they had these 2 huge trenches on either side that that just seemed to be left open forever. It was kind of dangerous, but finally they got filled in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, if it was on 302, that was probably state DOT that was doing that work.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get that confused, the DOT and the town.
Yeah.
Okay, so roads that are state roads are maintained specifically by the state?
And this was 302.
Built, and the only thing that we get stuck with is the cost of painting the lines, the parking lines. But they do everything else, the state DOT. And it, actually, and now this was going to surprise you, but I read a study that there's an organization that rates roads around the country, and they give you a state ranking on the states with the best roads and the states with the worst roads. And interestingly enough, the state roads in Connecticut, not the local roads, we got some bad news there, but the state roads are ranked 5th in the nation for quality. Wow. So the interstate highways and then the state highways like 302, 53, Route 6, 58. The state's been doing a good job in the last decade or so maintaining those. Where we fall down, though, we're dead last in terms of local roads.
Right.
And 50 out of 50?
Well, I think it's like 48, but we're way
pretty close,
down there.
Yeah.
But the problem is, the analysts say the state has done a very poor job of giving towns the resources to construct roads and to maintain them. Because really, it's almost like the debate about education. You know, how much do you have to fund locally through your local taxes, your local property taxes, versus how much should the state help you with those costs, try to even out spread that cost around fairly. And Connecticut, for most of the 20th century, has kind of pushed that off on localities like Bethel. Sometimes the towns have enough money to really do a good job. Very often they don't. They're very, very expensive. It costs about, depending on how much work you have to do, $350,000 up to $500,000 per mile to reconstruct a road, to do all this pulling apart, everything. Wow. It's an enormous cost. So I don't think it's fair to blame towns for not putting those resources.
Right.
Many towns just don't have it. Their taxpayers can't afford it. So that's one of the things that the state of Connecticut is trying to do, is put more money into state programs. Like there's a grant program they call TAR, which stands for Town Aid Road, and another one called LOTSIP, which is Local Transportation Improvement Program. There's a few other letters in there, I forget what they are.
Right.
But these are two grant programs that are designed to help towns like Bethel reconstruct the roads, and we've taken advantage of those too. I think over the last 4 years, like $4 or $5 million.
Wow.
That's helping us out a lot. So our taxpayers have put money into it as well, but the state is trying to step up and help with that. So roads are getting better. There's no question about it. They're in much better shape than they were 5 years ago.
You know, I'm always amazed too during the winters. I'll read in the paper how they'll say that towns actually run out of salt when in the winter. I mean, does that have to do too with the amount of money allotted to a town to buy for treating the roads in the winter? Or?
Not really on a town level. What happens is the regional suppliers run out of salt.
Okay.
And this year there's a great big terminal down in New Haven. So that's where salt comes in on big sea containers.
Okay.
And they come in on freighters. This year was okay. They came very close. I think in the last the last cold snap at the end of March, beginning of April, the New Haven terminal was just about empty. We happen to have an extremely experienced gentleman who runs the highway department, who plans ahead and stockpiles.
Okay.
So Bethel has never come close to. We've come a little bit close, but we've never really been in danger of not having salt.
Okay.
Some towns did run out of salt, but it wasn't us. But it really has to do with the shortage. Almost on a regional basis through up and down the whole East Coast. Now, last year was tougher. We were sometimes in the 2013-2014 season, we were getting maybe 60, 70 tons of salt delivered as it was snowing. I mean, it was right down to the wire where our guys were calling in every favor they could possibly find, saying, you gotta fill up our barn. We need salt. Wow. So we can stockpile. I think we've got room for like 8 to 10 tons, and we will use in the middle of the winter. We can easily use up 80 tons of stuff. So you have to keep a flow coming in all the time.
Right.
Now you have this I noticed you've got municipal water downtown now. It's not like it used to be, where you dug a hole in the ground and
pumped it out.
waited for it to fill up.
Yeah.
What's been going on with this water thing? What's going on with the water system in Bethel?
Well, actually, at about the time you climbed in your capsule, not too many years after that, as the town grew, and it's kind of interesting. Bethel actually is kind of our downtown is what you would call today a transit-oriented development. Because our little downtown village was up by the Congregational Church, but then when the railroad came through, people started building around the railroad as kind of a center of commerce. And as the town grew, there wasn't room for all these wells to be dug in there. So the town started, about 100 years or so ago, town started putting in a community well system and piping water. And it grew and it grew and it grew. So now the Bethel Utility Department has a little under 10,000 customers, people that are not customers, but population served.
People rather than households?
Yeah, people rather than households.
Oh, okay.
So roughly speaking, if you drew a line across from east to west across Bethel, so from the downtown area roughly and south is served by Bethel Water, by the Bethel Water Department.
Okay.
And then to the north, there are still many homes that have private wells, and a lot of it is served by a private company. There used to be 2 or 3 different companies up there. They've been purchased by Aquarian Water, which is a 150-year-old company that serves about 40 or 50% of Connecticut in general. They serve Connecticut, Massachusetts, and parts of Rhode Island. So
they've got those reservoirs, don't they?
They have
Aspetuck and the Saugatuck.
Yes, that used to be called the Bridgeport Consolidated Power Company, now owned by Aquarian. And those reservoirs, they not only supply in some places electric, but they supply drinking water. But we're not on those. Bethel Water Department is fed by wells that are in the East Swamp area that's out by the police station, as well as the Chestnut Ridge Reservoir, which is obviously up the Chestnut Ridge area. It's in a protected area. And here's where that stands today. Some of that infrastructure, like I said, is getting close to 100 years old, maybe a little bit more. There is another reservoir that's up in Danbury at the Eureka Lake area. Eureka Lake itself is no longer used for water supply. There are actually wells up there that pump water down. But the system for many years has been constrained. We don't really have enough water. It's adequate, but it's sensitive. One good fire and opening up a couple fire hydrants disrupts the system and you get rust. In the summertime, it becomes increasingly hard as the weather gets hot to keep the water that comes from the reservoir purified properly, because warm water grows microorganisms, so it has to be filtered and treated. So right now we're in a massive capital improvement program. It's going to be many tens of millions of dollars going to be spent over the next, say, 10 to 20 years. But in the end of it, you're going to have a system that is modern. It meets the new increasing state health regulations, and it will deliver clean water, high pressure. It will allow for further development of our industrial park, our business park out at Clark Business Park, which helps the grand list. And that is already underway. We've replaced a couple of pump stations. We will be breaking ground probably within the next month and a half or so on the big Eureka water tank. That was tied up in court for many years, but that's all been settled. We negotiated a settlement. The bids have been accepted. Department of Public Health at the state level, which heavily regulates all water, we're ready to go. And it's really nothing but green lights all the way, and it's a good project. I
imagine there's probably a lot of resistance from, what do you call them nowadays, NIMBYs, people who live in an area, not in my backyard. They don't want to see an ungodly-looking water tower that they can't see because the trees are in the way anyway, but they can just imagine that it's out there ready to strike fear into their hearts at some point.
Yeah, well,
water tower or cell phone tower.
Yeah, well, we
could go there too, couldn't we?
Yeah, well, the big water tank up in at the Eureka Lake area, again, that's a piece of property that the town of Bethel owns, but it's in the city limits of Danbury. But when this thing is constructed, you can't see it. You can see it from an airplane. You will not be able to see it from the road at all, or from any of the houses. Plus, for the neighbors up there, they will now have when that's done, they'll have a fire hydrant for for fire protection, which they don't have now. The nearest fire hydrant is a mile away.
Wow.
So everybody wins. It's a good deal.
It's funny, I haven't heard anything about this water tower thing, and
Well, it was the need for water improvement was identified more than 20 years ago. There was an effort made. The process was started, I think, in about 2005, so a decade ago.
Okay.
It went to the Danbury Planning Commission. They turned it down. Town of Bethel sued the city of Danbury, and then we're off to the races. So it went back and forth. It was in one court, and that court kicked it out to another court, and that court said, hey, why don't you guys go get along? Then it went to a land use court up in Hartford, and before it went to trial, I got together with the Danbury officials, and we said, look, let's see what we can work out here.
Right.
So now, interestingly, it's not even going to cost that much more. It's going to be more costly.
Okay.
But since all this, we've actually found that there are more grants available from the State Department of Public Health to offset some of those new costs. So
okay, so the delay might have actually been a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I think we're going to wind up with a better solution at lower cost to the ratepayers.
Oh, great.
So it's good stuff.
Win-win situation.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know it took 10 years for a process like that.
My experience, and since I've been elected to office, is that everything you want to do takes it between 10 and 20 years.
I got to say, I haven't just woken up from this little nap. I need another nap.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a nap. So let's meet back here tomorrow, Thursday. Let's meet back here at let's say noon 30 and continue the discussion.
All right.
All right.
So what we'll do is we'll say toodaloo from Progressive Soup.
By the way, when's the soup come?
I know. Slow service.
Good friend of ours named Dan Malloy, when he was here 2009 on the show, that's the first thing he said was, hey, where's the soup? We decided we better get some bowls at least. We're working on this.